Good morning. Thank you for joining me for this conversation today as we discuss the killing of George Floyd and the surrounding events in the aftermath. Since March 13th, I haven't discussed anything other than the coronavirus and its impacts on education and our response to the coronavirus. But given the gravity of what has happened, it is important to me to take some time away from that work to talk about the important need for us to have racial justice in California and in this country. I have to admit, it has been difficult for me to find my voice, to try to get my mind around such senseless acts that have occurred. It has been difficult for me to make sense of how a man could beg and plead for his life and still have his life snuffed out. It has been hard for me as a Black man who every day thinks about the impacts of race. I've struggled to know how and what to say about what has happened in the aftermath and the killing of George Floyd. It has been difficult for me as a parent raising African-American children to know what to say, how to answer their questions when they ask me, Dad, why did this happen? And to know that I have to confront my own vulnerability, that when they ask me, could this happen to them, that I may not be able to keep them safe, that all I can do is talk with them about how they might carry themselves if they're ever confronted, about actions that they might take that might make the difference in their well-being. It has been difficult for me as a public servant, as an elected official, to know how I can be helpful and to know how I can do more than just give platitudes, to know how I can do more than just offer condolences. And yes, the loved ones of George Floyd deserve our condolences, and to the loved ones of George Floyd, know that you have my condolences and my prayers. But I believe that you deserve more than condolences and prayers. I believe that you deserve action that leads to racial justice. I believe that you deserve justice for the senseless killing of your loved one. And I believe that we need more than talk and platitudes in this country. I believe that we have to have action, and that action has to be focused on dealing with race and racism and implicit bias. We have to be courageous and honest about the racism that exists in this country that could lead to such a senseless death at a time when we as a nation haven't even healed from the deaths of Ahmaud and Breonna, that we would be faced with a horrific killing of a man who begged for his life, who pleaded for his life. And as I struggled to find my own voice as an elected official, to know how to support our communities, I found myself coming back to our work and the importance of education and how we must use education to have these courageous and sometimes difficult conversations about race, about racism, and about implicit bias. How we should recognize the intersectionality of education and racism and its impact on Black and brown students who are more likely to be suspended and pushed out of school and pushed into the criminal justice system, to be labeled, to be given an education that is not equal and is not appropriate and is not adequate. And so I think that now is our time to speak and to give voice to our action to address racism and implicit bias in education. Today, I'm announcing that we will begin work on convening conversations with educational leaders all across the state and across the country to talk about what we do in the classroom, to talk about why we haven't done more to address implicit bias, to talk about what more we need to do specifically around implicit bias and helping to build empathy and building tolerance and teaching our children and using education to help us to find racial justice and to find ways to prevent the horrific events that have occurred from occurring again. That I'll be convening conversations with superintendents and educational leaders and educators and parents and students about what we can do in our schools, the conversations that we can have. But we have to go beyond education, because racism is taught. Children aren't naturally prone to be prejudiced unless they've been exposed to it. And so I say that to say that we cannot just stop with our students, but that we have to work with adults, and we have to deal with racism and bias in every sector, in education, and so as well as government and police agencies, and in every sector of our community. So in that respect, these courageous conversations that I'll be convening will go beyond the work that we'll do with superintendent and education leaders. We will do work with elected officials and police chiefs and leaders of police agencies and government agencies. And I'm grateful to all those leaders in our state legislature who've already been in touch with me about wanting to work together on ways that we look at legislation, that we look at training, that we look at real conversations around implicit bias. I understand that many are looking for a way to get involved, to have an outlet to express what you feel. And so we're creating a new online resource that will give people an opportunity to have resources and have information. And in the meantime, we've created an email address where you can, send a note about how you feel and your suggestions about what we need to do to promote racial justice. And I want to share that email address with you now. It is createrracialjustice@gmail.com. And that email is just the start of our creation of online resources that we will soon share. We want to create opportunities to support and to address the trauma that so many of us feel. We want to make sure that our children can be supported in the trauma that they will feel when they think about what has happened to George Floyd. I think about trauma every time I think about what has happened to George Floyd. I am haunted by the sounds of his voice, begging to breathe, begging for life. And we must address that trauma head on. And we must have hard conversations. And so we will do this with elected officials, locally, across the state. I've already reached out to many state superintendents all across our country. And we will continue this work. I've begun the path of starting in my own house at the California Department of Education. We will host convenings for our staff to provide support and listening sessions to address the trauma that many feel. We will then move to having conversations about how we, as the staff who provide support and education to 6 million students in our state and 10,000 schools across our state, how we will provide more training around implicit bias. We welcome those who want to join us in our conversations about addressing bias and addressing racism. I think for far too long, we've talked about race, but not really talked about race. And now it's time for us to do that. We must not let this moment go unnoticed. The loved ones of George Floyd have lost a loss that cannot be replaced. We owe it to the loved ones of George Floyd to honor his memory by bringing racial justice now. I appreciate all those who are protesting and raising your voices. I only ask that you protest peacefully, that you carry yourselves in ways that will be reflective of what our movement needs to be: getting racial justice, having courageous conversations about race and racism, how we can change it, and how we can get racial justice now. Again, if you need a place or an outlet to say how you feel, please send a note to createrracialjustice@gmail.com. We want to hear your suggestions about what more we need to do in this work. And we'll be sharing that out as we start to build out the online resources that we want to make available to anyone who is looking for a way, who's looking for an outlet, who's looking for a voice, to give voice to the work that lies ahead for all of us. So for now, stay tuned for updates about the online resources that we'll be building out. Stay tuned for the schedule of events that we will be organizing, first with educational leaders, and then with elected officials, and then with police officials, and with government officials, and with leaders in every sector, because we know that bias exists in every sector of our society. Today is a beginning, and I invite anyone who wishes to work with us to join us. We look forward to the work that lies ahead. Thank you, and please continue to be well.